Hello folks, this is Mr. Dan coming to you from the Landscape Design Classroom, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the basics of bedding plant production. So the main idea here is, what do I need to know to get started as a bedding plant producer? If we take a look here at the picture on the right, we have a bunch of bedding plants right here, some perennial flowers, some interesting stuff. We're going to take a look at a bunch of different bedding plants today, different varieties, and the proper treatment of those. So, what are bedding plants? They're annual plants raised for flower or food, an important source of income for many greenhouse growers. Plants that complete their entire life cycle in one growing season, and traditionally planted in prepared beds. So if we take a look at the picture on the right, typically you will see a lot of people out in the spring, early summer, planting their flowers outside, but they change those out every year because they typically use annual plants, and over time, especially heading into the winter, they die off, so they have to replace those plants every year. So that's why it's so advantageous for greenhouses to sell those. So three main types are tender, hardy, and half hardy. And there are also warm weather annuals and cool weather annuals in each of these three types. So if we have a warm weather annual, those will typically only grow during the summer and stay nicer looking, as compared to the cool weather annuals that you can pretty much have almost year round in the Pennsylvania climate, except for probably in the summer months. So tender annuals, like the marigolds shown here on the right, they cannot stand any frost, either as a seedling or as a mature plant. So as soon as a frost hits these, they're going to die off pretty directly. Started inside and transplanted outdoors when all threat of frost is past. So typically after about mid-May, these are whenever you can plant tender annuals. And some examples of these would be zinnia, marigold, red salvia, and verbena. Hardy annuals can take some exposure to frost, slightly longer bloom time than tender annuals, sown directly outdoors as soon as the soil can be worked, and may be started in the greenhouse to extend bloom time. And then some examples of this would be bachelor's button and calendula. So some half hardy annuals would be our third one, as you can see from the cleome here on the right. And these are intermediate in ability to take frost. Most started early in the greenhouse. And some examples of these would be the cleome, cosmos, and petunia. So the tender perennial, an extra category here. This is a perennial in nature, but normally grown as either tender annuals, which would be anything from coleus to wax begonias, or hardy annuals, which can be Elysium, anything down to snapdragons. And most started in the greenhouse. So some annual plants you can start outside of the greenhouse, but if you have the ability to, I would definitely start all plants in the greenhouse just to get those seedlings going. And if you can get them up to flower form before selling, or before you sell them, then that would be all the better. So three main types of annuals further subdivided into warm weather annuals, cool weather annuals, and looking into warm weather annuals, and a picture of some zinnias on the bottom, which are a great warm weather annual. They grow and flower best during hot weather. And examples of this would be zinnia, as you see on the bottom, geranium, and blue salvia. So some cool weather annuals, such as the nasturtiums. They grow best under cool conditions, stop blooming when it's hot and dry. So you want to get these in the ground, typically in the early spring, but just be wary of frost. Typically after May 15th, it's the best time to do that. But with the way our weather changes now, it can be a little bit of a crapshoot. So some examples of these would be a bachelor's button, lake spur, and nasturtiums. So generally do better in the northern regions. So we are a northern region, so you would want to take a look at some cool weather annuals. So moving on to where bedding plants are sold. Garden centers, supermarkets, convenience stores, roadside stands, and then moving into production requirements. What kind of equipment do we need? Usually requires a heated greenhouse, Normal greenhouse operation needs a good quality water source, shade cloth, fertilizer injector, watering system, growing tables, fans, pest control, and monitoring. Some other equipment: germinating growing mix, germination chamber area, plant starting trays or plastic cell packs, plastic flasks to hold growing packs, quality seed, and plant labels. Typically, just one little note here, whenever you are starting these plants, if you can start them in larger cell packs or in pots, it's actually better for the plant because it can grow a lot quicker. Because whenever you're moving them and transplanting them all the time, it kind of shocks that root structure and doesn't want to let those expand out as quickly. So having it in the same pot the entire time is definitely something you want to go for, but it also depends on the size of the plant you want to do that at. So more equipment for large growers, machines for filling flats or seedlings or seeding, vehicles for product delivery. So when you get into like some of these larger companies, you're going to have your own vehicle fleet. You're going to have machines that do a lot of the work for you just because you're going to be producing such a vast amount of plants. So moving into soil mix, you want to have a sterile pH adjusted soilless mix for germinating and growing bedding plants. Some examples of this would be like Jiffy Mix, Ready Earth, Pro Mix, which we have all of those here on campus, so we will be using those, especially Miracle Grow. Contain finely ground peat, vermiculite, and perlite, or perlite and fertilizer. So a little bit more on that. Most use pre-mixed commercial mixes to prevent disease. Some growers add fine sand or ground bark. Mixes are moistened prior to use. And then moving into germination, this is seeding must be prompt and uniform. Most plants are seeded in late winter, early spring for late spring sell. So these plants actually grow in pretty quickly, but the earlier you can get them in, as long as they're heated, the better they're going to look for your customer. But as I always say at any other time, make sure you read your label and do a little bit of research on every specific type of plant that you're working with. So direct seeding starts seeds in the cell packs in which they will be eventually sold. So like I said before, if you can keep it in the same container the entire time without transplanting, that is definitely key to selling really nice plants. Steps to successful seeding: pre-wetted seed starting mix in seed flats or cell packs with good drainage. Fresh, high-quality seed covered with fine vermiculite or sand. Germinating chamber or area with 70 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Bottom heat and uniform moisture, and that can be done with seed mats, which we'll take a look at here in class. And sprouts moved to full sun with good air circulation, lower temperatures, and additional light. For scheduling, you want seeding dates are figured by calculating delivery schedules. Growing time varies between growers and varieties. Careful record keeping pinpoints exact seeding dates. And just touching back on that a little bit, when these are delivered, you want them to be delivered in prime condition. You want to make sure your product is as nice looking as possible. So I can't stress research and reading labels on your plants because that will make you a lot of money in the long run. So transplanting. Some plants are transplanted as they grow or for container gardening. Most plants are now direct seeded in plastic cell packs with transplanting not necessary. And 8 packs of 4, 6, or 9 cells fit in a standard plastic 1020 flat. So if you are looking to order some of this stuff, you can find a lot of this stuff anywhere. I recommend either looking through BFG Supply or Greenhouse Megastore because you can buy that stuff in bulk. So growing on phase production may use a heated polyloop house. Includes fertilizing, pinching, growth regulator, application, etc. And in the hardening off stage, needed so plants can survive transplant stock. May use cold frames or lower nighttime temperatures, less frequent watering, fertilizing stopped or reduced, may use a heated hoop house. And just touching back on that less watering, whenever you're hardening off on your plants, you want to make sure that you aren't watering as much because those stems coming out of the ground, they actually tend to rot a little bit more during the hardening off stage. So just be very careful on how much you water, and make sure you're doing a little bit less than you normally would with those plants. So in terms of marketing, the most important part of growing, sales are through retail, wholesale, a combination of both. Any successful greenhouse usually is typically open to the public, especially if you're a smaller greenhouse, but the larger ones, they might just be selling straight to a store. So market research before production, and just make sure you know who you're selling to. Make sure you do the research before you try to start this type of business, especially if you're going to be growing and selling to a variety of people. But that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions at all, please get in touch with me down here in the Landscape Design Classroom. And I hope you have a great day, folks.